Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. I just have a couple quick announcements and we will get started. We wanted to first advertise an event. So I'll just see if this, that we have, actually it's this Friday, and it's our best practices series, and we're having a special valuation series. So if you're, this week's event is on the biotech sector, so if you're interested in learning about how investors view biotechs, how they evaluate biotech companies, and how the TSX sort of looks at that space. We have a speaker, Raymond King from the Toronto Stock Exchange, coming, and you can register online. The website is www.marsdd.com/bestpractices. If you're in the clean tech space, we actually have evaluations in the clean tech industry next Friday. Our best practices series are usually the presentation's about 12 to 1, and then from 1 to 1:30, there's a time for lots of questions. So it's a much smaller group. It tends to be between 40 and 60 people. So it's a really nice small event and gives you lots of chance to interact. And our video this week for Meet the Entrepreneurs is a clean tech company that we wanted to show you. The clean tech company is called Pond Biofuels, and it does some really neat, has a really neat way of capturing carbon to sort of use it as green fuel, and it involves algae that you would find in sort of your swimming pools. So it's about 4.5 minute video that sort of tells a little bit about how they latched onto that idea and how they grew it. And then we will start our presentation today with Steve Karkner on product development.
We ignored what everybody told us. Everybody told us all our algae would die. Everybody told us you could never grow it in commercial quantities. We were told routinely you'd never get it out of solution. We were told routinely you'd never get enough light to it in a large tank. Everything we did, we were told is impossible by experts. But I think by ignoring everyone, we actually ended up where we needed to be. I have ideas, and I think that's a problem. I'm sort of tortured with lots of them. I was reading an article in the Washington Post that said that you could make oil from algae. It occurred to me that it isn't too hard to make algae since I have a swimming pool, and getting algae to die is the problem, not getting it to live. I actually own this building, and there's an area at the front there that occurred to me I could grow algae in this area. Max Kolesnik has been my partner for about 10 years working on various innovation projects, and Max manages to impart enormous confidence in those around him. On a Saturday it occurred to me, I phoned Max on a Sunday and said, Max, why don't we do this? And Max agreed and said, yeah, let's do it. So we came here and our first algae was grown. We stopped on the way. We wanted to make sure that we had aseptic conditions, so we stopped at Shoppers Drug Mart and bought 4 liters of distilled water and some rubbing alcohol, and we used a coffee cup and a beaker. And all the algae's been grown from the coffee cup that we started in. That's how we got from the idea to beginning. The next big step is you have the idea and you're going to grow a couple of tubs of algae. What happens next? Making a dozen muffins in my oven to supplying second cup with muffins is a huge step. I now need to find whole systems to not just bake 12 at a time, but to bake 12 million at a time, package them, ship them. All of those problems, they seem like they're fairly straightforward. They're not. Our focus is industrial from the outset. We didn't design any equipment based on laboratory models. We spoke with manufacturers and said, can you make us a small analog of your huge piece of equipment, rather than finding a small piece of equipment and trying to find a manufacturer to make it big. And I think the primary difference between us and other people in the field is that we treated each one as an industrial challenge, not as a simple technical challenge. We didn't solve it in the laboratory, we solved it in huge tanks. We always look for how is this going to fit in making the 1 million muffins a day. You need massive amounts of carbon dioxide to grow the algae. All of the carbon in the algae comes from carbon dioxide. So you need a really big source of that. So, I mean, we had a couple of options. We could go try to burn a forest and use that carbon dioxide to grow algae. It didn't seem like a really good idea because we need to buy forests. So it became sort of obvious that this had to fit with industry in some way. The next step is, where do you find a partner who's willing to work with you in this? And that was where Terry took over.
We ended up picking cement as the vertical, cement manufacturing. And then we were fortunate enough to make an arrangement with St. Mary's Cement. They'd also been looking for us for some time. They didn't know our name, but they were looking for this type of a solution. And we were very fortunate from that point of view that their environmental group was intelligent, up to speed, and on top of what was going on. You can pick up a paper any day of the week at that time, or frankly any day now, and the issues about greenhouse gas are there. You've got this enormous conflict between essential industries that we need and the need for, oh that's right, breathing would be another need we have. And the thing that I just absolutely love about what we do is it resolves that conflict.
One of the challenges in doing this is that being the sort of technical lead along with Max, all questions end up at your doorstep. It doesn't matter what the question is, you have to have the answer to it. And the question could be as simple as the website's not working to all the algae died. What are the next steps for us? I don't know that I can think that far ahead. I tend to think in smaller pieces around the problems that are coming up on a sort of daily basis. Thinking about what's going to happen next week to me is a little bit more difficult. I actually tend to leave that to Terry, and he tells me what I'm thinking for next week, and I feel very good about that.
Success in our field and success for this company is basically success for all of us. And that's what we're all about, taking greenhouse gas and turning it into biomass that you can make biodiesel from to run vehicles on, biomass that you can feed to livestock. So unquestionably, it's certainly the most exciting thing I've ever worked on, because not only is it a hell of a business opportunity, it's actually doing something really nice as well.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Entrepreneurship 101. And I have to say, this is now the second talk that has emphasized disregarding the advice that experts give you. We're not really trying to undermine all the advisors here at Mars. Trust me, and I'm waiting for the head of our business advisory group to start watching some of these tapes and say, what the hell are you doing there? But it's interesting, and Pond Biofuels is a really cool company that I think is doing great work. And it's a nice tie-in product development to tonight's lecture, and I am delighted to invite back Steve Karkner, founder of Panasys, which is a product development company. Now, Steve, I guess, earned his stripes at RIM, helping RIM in the early days in its real rapid growth phase. But it was 2002 that he created Panasys to really get into product development. And I'm just, a lot of it is collaborative product development, and I think, Steve, you get folks come in with a cool idea who don't know how to implement. And you have your own ideas, but you also can partner with folks to help turn ideas into products. And there's really a full suite of services available through Panasys. It's interesting just talking with Steve now. The company has evolved from it has a lot of experience in medical devices, but has actually shifted over into power systems, which I think is kind of cool and actually reflects the need in business to go where the market is. I'm just going to make one last comment. Steve's lecture last year holds the record for downloads and views. And Steve has an amazing, I guess surprising audience in Korea. I think it was, Vietnam. I'm not entirely sure of how that link was created. So I'm delighted to welcome an international star of videos to give a talk on product development.
Well, with that, so hopefully this year nobody's going to fall asleep. I always strive to try and keep people awake. And the fact is that product development, it's maybe not as sexy a topic as if I was up here talking about financing and marketing plans and all that stuff. It's all very important. But at the end of the day, I think all of our businesses are formed on a product or a service, and how do you create that and deliver that? And that's really what this talk is about today. So to start off, though, I'm going to show you a little tiny video, which kind of may be designed to show you the bad side of what can happen with product development. So if you guys can run that at the back there.
Hey, I wanted to come say Merry Christmas before we all leave for the break.
Well, thank you, Lemon. That's very thoughtful. Help yourself to a gift. It's our new handheld photo scanner / paper shredder.
Oh, well, won't people just end up shredding their photos?
Well, no, it's very easy to use. If you want a photo scan, you flip the switch to PS. And if you want a paper shred, you flip the switch to... Oh.
I like that. I like it, but at the same time, you know, I've seen that happen in real life so many times. And you know, maybe not quite that obvious, but close. And you hear about this, right? You hear about metric and imperial and things not fitting, and you know, stuff gets all the way to the very, very, very end before you go, ah, crap. So hopefully I can give you a few pointers here to help avoid the oh crap at that stage of development. Because let me tell you, by that stage of development where you've got the product, oh man, you got to go all the way back to the start in some cases. Maybe not their case, but. Okay, so you've already heard about me and the company. The only thing I would add is that we used to be very broad product development, and we're gradually narrowing. In this presentation, I'll probably make references to other products we've designed because we used to be so broad. Now we really do focus just on power systems, frankly, because there's a lot of money in it. So anyway, you can read that later. So what do we focus on today? We focus on medical, military, consumer products. The focus is on advanced power systems. And we've been, I think, quite successful at it. We've got products, you can see our products in places like Walmart. That's our previous products, not our power products. Power products, powering things like artificial hearts. There's people today, right now, their hearts are beating and they're powered by power systems that Panisys not only designed, but that we manufacture. I almost said here in Ottawa, but I'm in Toronto, aren't I? That we manufacture in Ottawa. So it's good. Okay, I'll stop plugging the company and I'll start moving on to the actual presentation. So the product development path. What I want to really emphasize is that it doesn't matter if your product is big or small. I don't care if it's an aircraft carrier or if it's something as small as a flashlight. You should follow a similar product development path, which includes customers, what do you want it to do, you know, planning, all that stuff. It's really to avoid the failure you saw in that video. That's what we're trying to avoid, is that kind of a failure. And if you follow a path, it's going to increase your chance of delivering a product that not only works. People tend to focus on, oh, I've got this idea and I want to make sure it works. It's not about it working. It's about it satisfying the customer need. You can have a product that works perfectly and doesn't satisfy a customer need. So you got to balance it out. You can also satisfy a customer need and the product doesn't work and you're also screwed. So let's make sure that we do both. So, flashlight. I'm gonna use a flashlight in this. It was something new I tried last year, and people seem to like it for something to follow. Obviously, this could be anything. We'll start with a flashlight. So we're going to chart the development path of the flashlight against a standard product development path that you could use for anything. Just add a lot of zeros to your budget. Oops, sorry, I hit the back button. There we go. I'm going to tell you about the V model of product development, but understand that you don't have to follow this. There's all kinds of different product development paths you can take. The key really is to just make sure you follow something. There are very few people out there who just sort of come up with an idea and go forward with it and are successful without doing some kind of planning. And even in that, the pond biofuels, you know, it's very visionary. There's no question that it's very visionary. But you can see, you know, that big stuff. And I love the comment that we went to a company that did stuff that was big and asked them to make it smaller because it was easier than going small to big. That shows planning. That shows understanding and planning. So we're going to go through the V model. You usually start. Shoot, I didn't bring a laser. Damn. Up here. On that side, you start at concept of operations. work your way down the V, and then we go up the other side. And I'm going to walk you through each individual stage, starting at the concept of operations. When you get to the bottom, the implementation phase, implementation is what most people think of as product development. And in fact, if you ask somebody to budget for product development, I guarantee you they're going to focus 95% of the budget on implementation. Fact is, that, as you can see, is about 1/7 of the total plan. And that's about what it works out to in real life as well. So, concept of operations. What you need to ask yourself is, who wants it? What is it for? Who's going to pay for it? And what is your capability in the area? That last point is very important. Too often, I see people who say, well, I'll just do it all. I'll just do it all. I'm going to hire this, and I'm going to hire that, and I'm going to do this and do that. You can't be the best at everything. Recognize what you're really good at. Focus on what you're really good at, especially as a company starting out. You can add those things later. Focus on your capability in the area. So let's use this as an example. We're going to say, who wants it? Walmart, road warriors. Use them as stocking stuffers. What is it for? Who's going to pay for it? What's your capability in the area? Again, we can't do everything. If we try and do everything, you're going to end up with something that just, it's too big or too expensive. So you need to focus. So let's focus on road warriors. And remember, we're going to talk about flashlights. So let's focus on road warriors. We're going to build a flashlight for a road warrior. We're going to build a flashlight for serious lighting. Is this thing a toy or not? Who's going to pay for it? We're going to target consumers. And what's our capability in this area? Let's be a designer. We're not going to manufacture 10 million flashlights in our basement. So recognize what you're good at, try and focus on it. And now you can actually start to define and start to make a statement about what you're trying to do here. So we're going to build a flashlight for road warriors to use in serious lighting situations. It'll be bought by the consumer, and we're going to design the product, which means we're outsourcing manufacturing. We're going to outsource the distribution. And just a little entrepreneur's note, cheaper is rarely a viable business model. I hear that one all the time. We're going to have the cheapest. Not a good business model. Okay. So now, and this is part of the concept of operations. Now we need to get into the requirements and architecture. The first two documents, and we're really here talking a lot about documents because you want something that is tangible, something that you can refer back to, something that you can ask yourself, am I doing what I set out to do? These documents are also useful because it will allow you to maintain your focus where you can ask yourself every day if you want to, is what I'm doing contributing to my documents, contributing to my goals? It also helps prevent feature creep. I don't know if you're familiar with the term feature creep. That's where you say, hey, I'm going to design a flashlight. Oh, that's very cool. Why don't we put an FM radio in it? That's feature creep. So the first one is your customer and market requirements. That document should be not technical. That's the document that says, what does the customer really need? And you hear companies doing market studies, focus groups, things like that. You can do that if you're an expert in the area, and most people who start businesses start them because they have some kind of an affinity for that thing they're trying to do. You can do a lot of that stuff yourself. That's also a good area as well to take some of the gut feel approach. A lot of market studies can kind of lead you astray a little bit because when you ask people what they want, they tend to tell you what they think you want to hear, not what they're actually going to get their wallet out and pay for. So that's where the visionaries do a really good job. The next one is the functional requirements, a little bit more technical. The functional requirements should explain how you're going to address the customer requirements. Then you get into the product engineering spec and the test and verification spec. And again, a lot of people who do product development tend to start at the bottom, or start in the middle there. They start at the product and engineering specification and they work their way down. They don't go back to a customer. Think about the customer, everything else follows after that. And I'm going to go into these in a little more detail. The last point is that the issues that you find when you're designing it can typically change your technical specifications, but they should not change the customer spec. They shouldn't change the functional spec. If you've done your customer specification properly, then you shouldn't be tripped up later with discovering, a problem in your design phase. A problem in the design phase, oh, I can't get this to work, shouldn't impact everything all the way back. If it does, then that means you've got something that's far too technical in your customer specification, and you're not focusing on what the customer wants. An example of that is, internet. Nobody's going to say, I need an internet, well, people might, but most people won't say, I need an internet speed of X megabits per second. They're going to say, I want my videos fast. That's your customer spec. The megabits per second is your functional requirements in your product spec. So let's look into more detail about the customer and market requirements. So we're going to talk about durable and lightweight for the Road Warrior. So, which of these is good for a Road Warrior? It's kind of obvious. But if you got too focused on saying, I'm just going to make the lightest, Road Warriors want things really light. Don't get over-focused, because then you end up with something like the little keychain lights. Not really a Road Warrior thing. So the customer requirements allows you to specify all the different features that you want in the product and allows you to maintain a balance to make sure that all of the features that are important get an equal amount of attention. And again, it prevents feature creep as well, because if you put FM radio on here, you'd find out pretty quickly that, a Road Warrior probably really doesn't want an FM radio in their flashlight. So it enables focus, and it makes sure that you don't end up making just the lightest flashlight or the cheapest flashlight. And I'm not going to go through these. You can read those. Does it seem obvious? Probably does. And yet a lot of people don't do this. They don't go through this exercise. So if it seems obvious, that's great. It may also be that it's very obvious to you. If you're the person who's starting the company and you're the person who's running the company, if you're the visionary, I guarantee you that it's going to seem obvious to you. You would be really surprised, though, if you have 4 people in your company, you're starting out, you've got very little resources, you sit everybody down and you say, hey guys, what do you think the customer requirements are? You're going to get 4 different answers. And that means you've got 4 people who are all going in different directions. So again, this is where actually documenting it and being able to say, look, this is the customer requirement that we all agree on. Make sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction and you are spending your money wisely. Oh, hit the wrong button. When you're going through the customer requirements, you need to then translate each of those different customer requirements into a functional requirement. So as I said, it's more technical, but it shouldn't be too technical. So for example, lightweight. Great. The customer wants it to be lightweight. How lightweight is light enough? So you take a look at this and you say, well, less than 50 grams is good. I also like to put stretch goals in these, where you say, look, in order to make the customer happy, we need 50 grams. It'd be nice if we hit 40. You should also answer the question why if you can. Why? Well, because there's another customer out there, there's another competitor out there who's already at 50 grams. We could match them, but it would be better to beat them even by a little bit. And again, you go through all of them. How bright is it going to be? Drop, shock resistance, all those things. You want to answer them all, right? And you want to answer them all with a little bit more technical information. This is also a place to think about what extra features can we use to distinguish ourselves, to address some of the customer issues. So if a customer issue was reliability, well, for a flashlight, why not include a spare bulb? It's kind of cool. It's a good feature, and it's a feature that the customer will appreciate. It matches the customer spec. FM radio? No, not so much. I can't map that to a customer requirement. So a little bit of feature creep is okay. The next is getting into the product and engineering specification. Now you unleash the engineers, right? You say, guys, this is what the customer wants. This is where we want it, where we want this flashlight to be. And the engineers take a look at it and say, oh my God, you want this thing to be 40 grams as a stretch goal. How are we going to do that? Great. Now you got them thinking and you've got them focused. So, I don't know, batteries. Good example. Should this thing run on 4 AA's? Well, clearly not. Should it run on 4 AAA's? Yeah, it's not great. Be better if it was 1 AAA. Maybe that conflicts with some of the other requirements, though, about reliability and long life and things like that. So it gets your engineers focused, or if you happen to be a company that maybe all you want to focus on is distributing. If you're going to be a distributor, you have to hire a design company. Now you've got something that you can go to the design company and say, you know, I don't really care how you do it. I want a flashlight that's under 50 grams. So it's allowing you to explain your vision in a way that that engineering design company can understand. Very key, measurable goals, save your money. And again, you go through the list. I'm not going to go through the list. Now, you've got your engineering specification. The nice thing about the engineering spec is it has numbers. Numbers are good because numbers can be measured, as opposed to just saying, I want a light flashlight. You say light, lightweight to an engineering design company, and they're going to come back with all kinds of stuff that doesn't make sense. You've told them you want 50 grams. Wonderful. Easy enough to prove. So you come up with your test and verification spec. Your test and verification spec should focus on prove it for the functional specification. If you prove it, and if you've written that specification correctly, not only have you proven that the design was done properly, but because the design referred to the market and the customer requirements, you've actually proven that you've got a product that will be accepted by the market. It all flows. So that's an easy one to do. There's a whole bunch of others. Some are going to be harder. Obviously, the more complex the product is, the harder it's going to be, and the more little tiny pieces it's going to be broken down into. So as you get into really complex products, you break it down into a billion little tiny pieces. But if you've done this right, all those billion tiny little pieces, all being tested, all come back up together, and they all build up into that original customer spec of, I want an aircraft carrier. Yeah. And the last point, every item from the spec should be checked. If you don't, guaranteed the one you don't check is the one that's going to sink you. It just, Murphy's Law or whoever's law, it's going to sink you. Something that I don't see as often as I'd like when I'm presented with a test spec is a sensitivity analysis. And an example of that, again, I'll use the lightweight thing. We want it to be 50 grams. 50? 50 plus or minus what? What's acceptable? Because if you put out a product that's 50 grams plus or minus 5, can you really go to the market and say 50, or do you have to say 55 max? Well, now, that's not as good. So you should have sensitivity analysis, what variation is allowed, also what variation is allowed in production. And that's very important, especially if you're going into, well, Walmart's a great example. One of the products we did was a light, actually an LED light that was sold into Walmart. And it was very important to them that they all looked the same. Well, they all look the same. How the same? How do you define, what light level is acceptable? And we had to show them stuff and say, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? By doing that, we got to a number. And once we had the number, now we've got something testable. Now we can make sure that every single product meets the goal and is consistent. So that's where the test and verification specs come in. All of this test and verification document is focusing on your design. It's not focusing on in production. It'd kill you. If you tried to do all these tests in production, your production test would be so incredibly long, you'd blow your product cost out of the water. So this document is to define how to test, the design, not how to test every single product. Finally, we're in the detailed design stage. A lot of people start here. You've done a lot of work before you get here, but guaranteed, once you get to actually designing now, your design work is going to be so much more efficient. You've got something to follow, and not only do you have something to follow, but you know when you're done. It's always nice to know when you're done. So you can go through the requirements. You can go through the requirements. You can have the confidence that you're going to deliver something that meets those engineering and customer requirements. Now you can start implementing the thing. Maybe you have to break this up. Maybe you have to say, hey, you know, I'm going to have this circuit board done by one company. I'm going to have this mechanical enclosure done by another. At this point, it's really easy because you can actually slice and dice. You know exactly what you want. It becomes really easy to bring a whole bunch of people into the project because everybody's going to row in the same direction. You want to create a statement of work for any subcontracted tasks. Statement of work becomes really easy because you can just take a piece out of your specification and say, this is exactly what I need. You put it into a statement of work. You can actually put that statement of work into the contract you give to your contractors. Here's exactly what I want you to do. Here's exactly how you know when you're done. And that's going to prevent all kinds of iterations and extra charges. And the last point is be careful about any departure from the specifications. Be careful about feature creep. You may have that contractor come back and say, geez, I know you wanted 50 grams, but I can't get it below 60, and here's why. If they do that, you know, that's going to be obviously a decision for you as the business owner. But make sure to document it. Make sure to document and say, well, okay, 60 grams is going to be all right, and here's why. Go back and document. Check it against the customer requirements. Don't let them off the hook just because there's, you know, something that's tripping them up. One of the tactics that I like, and you don't have to buy an expensive system, although there are expensive systems, I like spreadsheets. And I know you can't read this, you don't really have to, but this is an idea that we still use today for tracking problems. Not just problems, but tracking feedback. And this can be feedback from you, it can be feedback from the people who are doing the design, it can be feedback from the customers. So, let's see. Yeah, so for example, the first one there, you know, the customer specification does not explain what the charge enable signal is used for. This is real, by the way. This is from a real project. So it doesn't explain what it's for. Can it be ignored? We plan to ignore it. And then you come across and it says, you know, how to fix or suggested fix. This is being clarified. The signal is an absolute requirement. Second processor has been added to the design to handle it. It's closed. We now have a way of tracking it. If that was still open, then that would mean that, you know, we need a second processor, we need to handle this thing, and we can make sure that when this list becomes 200 individual little changes, we can ensure that it's actually tracked. The next revision of the product, we make sure they're all closed. Nothing falls through the cracks. The next time we revise the customer requirement document, we can check it against this. If we are selling this to a company like, you know, Walmart, might as well mention them. If we're selling it to a customer, we can actually show them, walk them through anything that affects them. Not everything is going to affect them, but there might be some things that affect them. Integration, test, and verification. Real exciting stuff now. So this is where we want to take all of the stuff we've done to date, from all the different subcontractors, all the different people, all the different pieces, all the manufactured stuff, and we want to actually start putting it together into a real product. And this is the part that I often see it's not that it's budgeted at zero, it's that it's not even in the budget. There's just an assumption that, well, if everybody does their job, you're just going to plug it together and it works, right? No. In fact, it rarely works when you first plug it together. There's always something that has to be changed and modified to make it all work. So don't underestimate this. In fact, what I've seen in budgets that actually work, or by post-analysis of programs, is that you should include the same amount of time for integration, test, and verification that you do for design. It's an equal task. This is the case as well, where quite often if you've shipped a product, you may have to get on a plane to go and solve the problem, or to see it in action, right? They ship the thing back to you, you try it out, it works in your lab. Damn, it works in the lab, but it doesn't work in the field. What do? You have to actually go to the field, bring a couple people, maybe you got to wait 3 days before it repeats it. The costs add up really, really fast. So if I'm budgeting for a project, I'm going to budget the same amount after design as I do for the design itself. Rule of thumb. Bigger the product, the more complex. Maybe you want to even put more in. So, it will not work the first time. I love that image. That's one of my favorite images. Most of the problems you're going to encounter are going to tie back to the technical spec. I hope they do, because if they tie back to the customer spec, then maybe you kind of screwed up, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So they'll tie back to the technical spec. It's where you're going to realize that, oh shoot, you know, the technical specification said I needed a charge enable signal, but I forgot to say whether it was a positive signal or a negative signal. And that subcontractor made it positive, and that one over there made it negative, because I didn't say which. We're human, it's going to happen. So resist the temptation to just quickly revise it on the fly. Stop, look at the problem, understand how it impacts, not just that one little piece. Understand if it impacts anything going back. At least take a quick look back to the technical spec, and maybe even further back, to make sure there's nothing else that it's going to affect, and then make your change. If you can, don't make the change at all. Wait, because you're going to have 10 other changes anyway. So don't resist, don't do it on the fly, wait. Wait until you have to. Then fix the specification, revise the statement of work, and now start to move forward again. So fix it once, don't break something else in the process. Can't stress it enough. Now we move on to system verification and validation. Real exciting stuff. But this is where you're starting to get into the real world. Whatever you're designing, product or service, probably it doesn't operate on its own. Everything seems to be interconnected now, and it's often interconnected in ways that you can't control. So I don't know, if you come up with an iPhone, that's great. You got an iPhone, but the iPhone has to deal with, you know, a wireless network that you have no control over. And maybe you've read all the specifications on the wireless network, but guaranteed there's going to be stuff in there that's wrong. Stuff that you have to learn by doing. So, so you're going to put this thing into the real world. A lot of the problems you're going to encounter are going to tie back to the customer requirements. They're not going to be so much technical, they're going to be more customer requirements. Like, you know, oh shoot, we didn't think that customers actually go in the basement where there's no network coverage, and the application we wrote requires network coverage. Shoot. We have, you know, let's rewrite that part of the application so that if there's no network coverage, the application still works. It doesn't just freeze, right? So it's going to tie back to your customer requirements, that you know, in that case, that the application works everywhere. And the most common complaint is unexpected interactions. I think, actually, I still remember Tony gave a great example last year about military vest. And the military vest was great. It met every single requirement. It was comfortable. Everybody loved the vest. And this other company designed this great helmet, and everybody loved the helmet, and it fit, and it matched all the requirements. But when you put on the vest and the helmet, when you tipped your head back, would hit the vest. Unexpected, like there's just nothing you can do really for that except hope that whoever defined the whole program that included a helmet and a vest would have figured that out, but they didn't. So unexpected interactions are going to happen. How do you handle it? And the next one, I guess continuing on. Yeah, okay, so looking at this, the system verification plan some more, having a detailed way of going through and checking all those things is really important. Even with that vest example, a good way to avoid that would have been, you know, don't just try on the vest. Try on the vest with equipment that soldiers commonly wear. Have a selection of those, try it all on together. That should be part of your system verification plan, because the system is the soldier with a helmet and a gun and, you know, whatever else they wear. Like the paper shredder example, a mistake at this point could cost you most of the program, right? You realize that, oh crap, you know, like she said, won't people just end up shredding their photos? If the answer is yeah, most people end up shredding your photos, then you've just wasted a lot of time. And why? Because you really made a mistake in your customer spec. Here's another good example, and real world in this case. A large gun manufacturer, they wanted to come up with a light that was very, very low power. And people have seen these, you know, LED flashlights, which is great, very low power. And And so what they wanted to do was mount it on the gun so that when the officer held the gun, they still had a hand free. They didn't have to hold like a gun and a flashlight, because now you've got no hands free. And the problem they ran into, even though it met all the requirements in terms of being how bright it was and everything else, the problem they ran into was that they do a test where they put somebody, I think it was like 100 feet away, it's on the text, they put somebody like 100 feet away, and they had them hold a gun or a baby or a stick. A gun, a stick, or a doll. And what they found was, for some reason, with the incandescent light bulb flashlight, the old style flashlight, you could tell right away what the guy's holding right away. But for some reason, these little LED lights, the light from them is so specific in color that the human eye didn't react very well. And so when they actually used this thing, even though it was just as bright and everything else, they just couldn't tell the difference between the guy holding a gun or a doll. And so now they actually had to go back and say, well, what did we miss? And it turned out to be wavelengths of light and how the human eye, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that it actually led to a whole research program. But it's a real world example of unexpected interactions, the unexpected interaction of how the human eye reacted to that particular form of light really tripped them up. A few other points. These aren't necessarily part of the V model, but they're important because you're going to encounter them. And I should go back to the V model, but on the V model, as you come down the one side and go up the other side, every mistake you encounter relates back, and you should always be relating back. And a good example of that is to treat failures like gold, especially on your prototypes. If you build 10 of something, or if you release a beta version of an application, you're going to have failures. And especially if stuff is hand-built or compiled in a hurry, there's always this feeling like, it's just a prototype. It's just a prototype. It's probably just because it was hand-built. There's always this sense of, because it's a prototype, because it's a beta, we can ignore that failure, that particular failure. And it's a mistake. It's a mistake. Time and time again, that particular failure is going to rear its ugly head again. And even though, maybe on the beta, it happened once, they reset their computer and they never saw it again for the whole rest of the trial. That one little error that came up you never saw again. The tendency to want to just discount it as a fluke is there. But remember that probably you want to scale up. Probably you want to sell millions of whatever it is you're designing or whatever it is that you're making. And if you want to sell millions, then that 1 in 100, 1 in 10, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 in your beta is suddenly going to multiply into something really, really big. And before you know it, you're going to need a staff of 20 people just to answer the phone because of that one little bug that you had a chance to kill in your first beta. So treat failures like gold should be an absolute mantra at that stage where you're first releasing the product. And that kind of leads into the operations and maintenance aspect. And again, very often ignored. We're going to build something, we're going to release something, it's going to go out in the market, people are going to love it, and they're going to buy thousands of them. Great, and how do you handle the calls? Because there's going to be calls. I've been in product launches where we had a 70% return, or sorry, not a 70%, where of the returns that we got, 70% of the product that came back had no fault found. So you can have a perfect product that works perfectly well, and people are still going to return it. Even if it works flawlessly, people are still going to return it. So in the case of that product, 70% of what we got back had no problem. People just, they bought it and they just decided that they didn't want it. It maybe didn't meet their customer spec. Maybe that was our mistake. But are you prepared for that? Because it can cripple your company. It can bring you absolutely to your knees when that phone starts ringing, and all of a sudden the guys who are meant to be selling new product and the people who are meant to be designing new product end up spending all their time addressing problems. And it can also stall new development. I've seen companies that went 3 or 4 years without releasing a new product, and you ask why, and they say, well, because our guys are all busy maintaining the old stuff. They're too busy on the old stuff to focus on the new stuff. So, are you ready? Are you ready for production, but are you also ready for the maintenance of the design, for the maintenance of your approvals? Have you considered how you're going to make sure that when a vendor changes, when a component goes obsolete, that your product is still the same product it always was. This is where, again, you come back to this documentation set, because this could be 3 years down the road. You've had employee turnover. The guy that's head of engineering wasn't the head of engineering when the product was designed, and you say to him, hey, has the product changed? That product verification document that you put together is so useful at this point, because you can now say, okay, well, you know what? We've been producing this product for 2 years or 3 years, and the product's being produced okay, but does it still meet the original design intent? And that's where you're going to find out that, hey, maybe this new power supply that you bought from a cheaper vendor doesn't actually survive the original design test. Oh, and that all of a sudden explains why you're getting higher warranty returns, and it all fits together really nicely. So this document set you put together serves to educate as your company gains more maturity. It will serve to educate new employees. It will serve to provide a link between the people who envision the product and the people who will eventually take over your operations and maintenance. I think I talked about that already, about steep deployment ramp. Make sure you're ready to handle it. The only other thing I'd point out here is that there are companies who actually do this outsourced, and they do it very well. If you're planning on, especially consumer stuff, if you're planning on releasing consumer stuff, there's companies who are just fantastic at they've already got the call center. They've got actually very smart people. You give them your owner's manual, you walk them through the product, and that's it. You can just let them go. And they'll handle your tier 1, tier 2 support. If they can't answer the question, then then you'll actually get the call. But by then, 80 to 90% of the calls have been handled, and you don't have to deal with it. The other point is seek out friendly customers. And this is something that I think is underestimated, is to consider who is a friendly customer, because the friendly customers are the people who will take your product, test your product, and not come to beat you up if the product fails. These are the people who are going to say, oh, didn't quite work out, guys. Can you revise it and give it another try? Oh, I thought I had more on that. Anyway, seek out friendly customers. The next point is that it's normal to go to revision 2. A lot of people think revision 2 is a failure, and I like to think of revision 2 as an opportunity. So any minor issues you find, collect them. Don't revise on the fly. Collect, collect, collect. Any issues you get from your customers, treat failures like gold. Even the product that was returned with no fault found is a very useful return because there was a reason it came back. If you can, call them up. I've picked up the phone and called people and said, hey, why'd you return it? Incredible information that you get from doing that. Absolutely incredible. Because the people who buy your product and keep your product are not the people you have to worry about. It's the people who bought your product and returned it. So pick up the phone, give them a call, find out why they returned it, think about what you can do in revision 2. Add it to your tracker, whatever you use for tracking reports from your customers, and move forward. And what you'll find is all of a sudden, revision 2, you're making more money. Maybe it's even easier to produce. You're going to roll in all the stuff from production that you're going to find. Listen to your production workers, because they'll say, hey, if this screw went in this way instead of this way, it would be half the time to assemble. All kinds of good stuff. And this is the time as well to allow feature creep. It's okay. Revision 2 is a good time for feature creep for the right features. And that's, pick up the phone, call the customers, find out what they want. The last piece of the presentation is to show you a few project management tools. This is really basic stuff. Some of you, I hope all of you have already seen similar tools, but I want to make sure you see them because they are out there. The two that I like, Gantt charts and gate review charts. A Gantt chart, I'll do a plug anyway, Microsoft Project, for example, which I think they don't make anymore. I think they stopped making Microsoft Project, which kind of sucks, but there's lots of other ones out there. It's just a way of tracking, you can plug in all your different tasks, how long you think it's going to be, who you think the resources are. Very, very easy, very intuitive. And now you've got something you can follow and you've got something to revise. The thing that always surprises me, every single time I do a Gantt chart, it surprises me. I go through whatever it is I'm designing or whatever it is I'm trying to do. I plug in all the individual tasks, scratch my head and make my best estimate of how long it will take, what resource is going to get assigned to it. It always blows me away how big projects are. Every time. Every time I'm like, wow, this project was bigger than I expected. Wow, I hadn't considered how long it's going to take me to do this project. So even if you've got a simple thing like a flashlight, plug it into one of these and you're going to be surprised. And it's going to help you to plan. And it's going to help you to think, geez, you know what, that big section there, maybe I should have another company do that. Another example, another thing to consider is this gate review plan. And this is a good way to prevent design iterations. This particular one, and you can basically choose your own, but if you do a search on the internet, you'll find all kinds of cool stuff. But in this case, we talk about an opportunity assessment. So that's where your marketing guy comes in and says, hey, this is really a cool idea. So gate 0 might be, for example, analyze the return on analysis, get your financial people in there, get your project manager in, make sure you've got the resources to carry it out. Once everybody agrees, then you move to the planning stage. The planning stage plans out how the project's going to work. Once everything's together, you hit the next gate. And the idea of these gate reviews is that you don't end up with, oh geez, engineering has already started designing this thing, and the finance guy is still back at gate number 0 saying, we don't have the money for this. So that's what the gate review is for. Military loves this. The military guys love this stuff. Budgeting for development, a few, I guess, rule of thumb notes on budgeting. You'll be over budget. Everybody's always over budget. I really think it's better to be over budget and do a good job than to be on budget and release a product that doesn't work and hasn't been properly tested. Remember that budget can refer to more than just dollars. There's companies that I've run into that I refer to as resource bankrupt. They have lots of money and they have the wrong resources. So you can be resource bankrupt or you can be money bankrupt. And it's important that when you're budgeting, you make sure that you have the right resources. Especially if you've got like a scientist or something, a guy that, there's one guy in all of North America who understands how to make algae grow. Well, do you have that guy? Because if you don't, you got a problem. So understand your resources. The second bullet from the bottom, find similar products. See if you can find out how much it costs to develop them. That sounds really hard, but it's actually getting easier with the public company and disclosure information. If you're thinking about producing a product or a service in a certain area, quite often companies will have in their publicly accessible financial statements an R&D line. Well, there you go. Add up the R&D lines and you'll see pretty soon that if you think it's going to cost you $50,000 to develop a flashlight and you find out that, I don't know, Maglite spent, I don't know what it would be, $5 million last year on R&D, there's more to designing a flashlight than you thought. So look for public information and maybe even ask companies, do a search, look for design consulting companies who have already done it and say, hey, what did that end up costing? People will give you the information because they'd rather see you raise the right amount of money and be prepared for what you're undertaking than to see you come in and run out of money a quarter of the way through. And don't expect to beat the predictions just because you're small and fast and smarter, because that doesn't always work to your advantage. Sometimes the big guys have created so much stuff, they've got so much to draw on that they can actually be faster and cheaper at developing something because they're pulling from 10 different areas that they've already developed. You're starting everything from scratch. Choosing a partner. I've talked a lot about subcontracting. And subcontracting is a really good way of getting things done and getting things done fast. Check out references, ask around, find out who's worked with different companies. Don't be afraid to ask the companies for references. I don't know why people are always afraid to do that, to say, great, Give me the names of the last 3 companies you did development work for. Don't just ask them for a reference, because then they're going to give you, the choice reference, their next door neighbor. No. Who was the last 3 companies? Or even, who is the last 2 companies and one that you're doing work with now? Because those are the guys that you're going to get the real story from. When you call them, say to them, were they over budget? How do they typically want to get paid? Ask all those questions. It's, you can't be faulted for doing your homework. You can't be faulted for going in with your heads up. And yet, for some reason, people are embarrassed to do it. I think in the 7 years that Panisys has been running, I don't think anyone has ever asked me for a reference. I don't think even once I've ever been asked to provide a reference. And that I find stunning. Somebody should have. Anyway, hopefully I'd find some good ones. Be open with the companies you're working with. If you don't have as much money as you need for the project, tell them you don't have enough money. Much better to be open at the beginning, because that's when you're going to find out that, oh, well, maybe we can take some risk, maybe we can do some stuff up front. Be open. Especially in Canada, it works really well. We seem to be an open culture. Contracts, I'm not going to go through the legality of contracts, but just wanted to touch on a few things that, make sure you feel the trust. I've always felt like if you don't feel like you can do business on a handshake, then don't do business with the person. You still need a contract. But if you don't feel like that handshake is enough, you got a problem. Just walk. There's going to be other companies you can work with, I'm sure. I'm not going to go through all these, but the biggest thing with the contracts is to figure out when the person's done. And again, that refers back to all those technical specs and everything else. They form a wonderful basis for these contracts. You don't want the lawyers trying to write a functional spec. You've got that great document set included in the contract. And I just thought I'd put this up. It's one last look at the flashlight, because it is easy. It is really easy to think, flashlights are so simple. How could it be hard? But you look at all these elements, and you go, geez, there's a little ring up at the front, and it's got some words on it, and there's glass pieces, and where do I get that made, and how do I specify the glass so it fits in that, and all these individual little pieces and bulbs and batteries, and every single one of these pieces is actually another project. Every one of these has to be specified, and I can guarantee you that the company that makes a little bit of glass is not the same company that makes that ring. And the people who make the ring might not be the same people that make that cylinder back there with the threading on it, because threading's really hard to do. So, you got to break it down. And the better specified it is, the better delivery you're going to get, and the more likely you are to hit your product requirement. The other thing I love about this is number 4 up there, which is a spare light bulb. Amazing how many people don't realize that in the back of the flashlight, there's actually a spare bulb for mag lights. It's a great feature. I don't know why they don't show people more, but I always like that. And I think that's it. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. 2 minutes left.
Hi. I had a question about 3D printers. I heard about a lot of, there's a new kind of 3D printer that you can use to create prototypes and all the little parts in your things too. And so I wanted to ask if you knew anything about that.
Actually, I was the first person in the world to use a 3D printer to make a consumer product that was released to market.
Oh, wow.
Almost, 15 years ago. Yeah, we used one of those 3D printers to do that. There's a whole lot of different kinds of 3D printers. They are amazing, and they've come a long way. The thing to understand with 3D printers is what the prototype is for that you're making, because some of them produce very strong models that don't look very good, and some of them produce models that look great but are very weak. So talk to a company that has a lot of different printers, and they'll tell you which one is the best for your application.
Yeah, I heard you can, they're really affordable now. You can buy like a 3D printer for like, there's one company that makes it for $1,500. You can still buy it for $1,500.
Again, depends on what you want to use it for. If you want to print, like make a prototype to use as a marketing sample, for example, I would recommend going to a company that has them, because the job they will do is absolutely incredible. We've had stainless steel prototypes made that are actually plastic, and you would swear that they were stainless steel. I've seen boat propellers for outboard motors made on these things that were strong enough that they could mount them on the outboard motor, and they were printed. You're not going to get that with your own. I guess what your own printer would be good for is if you iterate a lot. And that's really what I'd be worried about, is that it would actually make you iterate instead of have you think.
I was thinking about, because one of my friends is starting a company similar to yours, but on a smaller scale for students, and just he's like a startup lab, and he wanted to buy one for that. So I was wondering.
Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense then, yeah, because they'd be using it enough to make it worth it. So.
Okay,
yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, as the product moved from the design stage to closer towards the customer and into the customer's hand, I wonder if you could talk about the importance of having a production manager, and where does that production manager comes into the phase and managing the life of the product throughout the phase. Thank you.
Okay. Boy, it's a tough one, because it's one of those depends questions, right? On what is your core focus? Is that your specialty? Is that your strength? If it's your strength to do the manufacturing, then you should actually try to have the production manager on staff when you're starting your development, not at the end, because you need that person to be there to say, what level of testing is appropriate. Who's going to run the test? Your production manager is. If you really want to be into that level of production as well, you're going to need what's called a PLM system, a product life management system. Your production manager does not run that system. So production manager produces things. They aren't sort of further down the path. So it's a tough one to answer. It's going to depend on what your company is, what your focus is. Okay? Yes?
And just to come back to some project management tools you mentioned.
Yes.
The second one was Gate Review Plan. And I'm not sure if you mentioned the software that could be used for that. Is there an open source, or is it the project software?
I'm sure that there's gate review software out there. I couldn't tell you the name of one right now, because we usually just draw them. But yeah, I'm pretty certain there are. And also you can, on the gates, you can also put down, on the software I've seen, you can actually put down what the particular inputs are to the gate, so that you can actually outline that and show it in a different format. And again, I would love to take hours to go through all this stuff, but yeah, there is software, and it will draw it out really nicely in a nice visual format, so you can see what exactly do you need for each gate, what gate feeds to another gate, how it all kind of comes together.
Thanks.
Yeah.
With something like a broad market like Walmart, how do you find your friendly customers?
Actually, Walmart was really good to deal with. I'm a huge fan of Walmart. They made it really easy to understand what the process is to get it into their store. They did test marketing they did a few stores to get the product out there. And we actually had interactions to figure out initially, why the product wasn't selling, how should it be positioned differently in the store. We even changed the packaging to make the product more appealing, and so they were the friendly customer. They were in that case.
So on a smaller level, where would you find your friendly customers? Do you keep a database of who you sell it to? Do you do anything special?
Okay, so the friendly customers really, you would focus on who needs it the most, is a good example of a friendly customer. So in our business, for example, we do the power systems we do. We had a customer who had a $5,000 per pound penalty for every pound their product was overweight. Now this was a big military vehicle, right? But it was like $5,000 a pound. So there's a customer who is going to be extremely friendly if you walk in and say, I can save you 100 pounds by buying our power system. So, and the best way to find those people is networking. Absolutely networking. Just look up the smallest organizations, especially if it's a particular field. Networking requires some travel as well usually, but yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Go ahead.
Hi. I hope you can answer this question. Could you comment on how your development model would apply or maybe not apply to organizations that aren't really developing a product but intellectual property that might be taken up by another investor or bought up by another company?
Good question.
Yeah. So I'm in the biotech sphere, so
yeah,
you know, our aim is kind of to identify potential candidates for pharmaceutical development. And I mean, we kind of understand what the needs of investors and what patients require as like a successful candidate that goes into clinical trials. But you know, using the model that you're proposing or that you're discussing about developing consumer products, you know, I'm just thinking about how that could apply to something in a research lab.
Well, research actually is one area that is really hard to not only to schedule but to budget as well.
Yeah,
and that's something we get asked a lot. Is even today, because some of the power stuff we do, where we're asked to do something which is just so wildly out there, and we say, yeah, we can do that, but it could take us 2 years. It could take us 2 weeks. We don't know.
Right.
So I think with that,
but not necessarily in terms of controlling your budget, but just, you know, specifying the requirements that you need for like a successful product, which is IP. I don't know.
Oh well, that you should still be able to plug that in then to like a Gantt chart and to say what are the steps we require in order to get to the point of being able to patent this or getting to the point of an approval, because all of those things have certain steps you have to go through. So I think anytime that you have something with steps, you should be able to map it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Hello.
Hi.
Based on your experience, what's a good point in the product life cycle to stop and help design for revision 2?
I would say the point at which you're making some sales on revision 1, because that's going to help you pay for revision 2. Don't stop too soon.
I mean, I'm just wondering, because again, you're going to go back to a redesign process. So do you think halfway through, like I know you'll have to make your revision 2 to overlap, like the work for revision 2 will have to overlap your production for revision 1?
I think it's when there's enough things collected to make it worth it. And you know, we've had products that we thought we would be on revision 2. We've got actually one product that we created the project for revision 2 and didn't start it. And we've been 3 years now, and we're still selling Rev 1. And we just haven't hit the point where it's like, you know what, thing's still selling, it's still making money. Why do revision 2? You know, it's really going to depend on how many things do you need to change, why do you need to change them, is it going to increase your market to do the change? And when you get to that point, that's really where you should start, when it actually makes fiscal sense. Think about it from that gate review point of view, right? Do your opportunity analysis. And maybe that opportunity analysis gets done every week as part of like an engineering meeting. Maybe that opportunity analysis gets done once a quarter when you meet with your board of directors or you meet with your senior management team and you have your little strategic getaway and you say, hey, what's coming up that we need to think about? So yeah, do an opportunity analysis, and there's no set point.